overall prices tend to rise too. Now, we're going to be looking at some statistics as it were as well. We'll look at July 2025, much more higher than wage growth. Like I said earlier on, there is not much when it comes to wage, especially we look at the workers from the civil service. And again, you look at prices, food prices soared nearly to 40%, driven by staple foods such as rice, yam, fish, and of course, grains. Because food is such a large part of household spending, any big jump in prices definitely will affect inputs or cost of production change. So let's look at how this reflects in some of the how will I put it now, in some of the things we see in Nigeria. We'll look at raw materials, for instance, and production costs. You know, fuel prices definitely affect transport and electricity. Yeah, as a result of remember the fuel subsidy removal. Now, that fuel subsidy removal affected transport and of course electricity costs, where these are passed on to consumers. The burden was actually passed on to consumers via higher prices of for goods and services. Now, the basic inputs here, like rice, maize, in fact, poultry, feed, they also experience rise in prices because of poor local production and higher import costs. So, like I said earlier on, when you look at the statistics we've given so far from November 2024, we kept seeing the statistics going down, the percentage going down, but inflation slows statistically. Even at that, many prices remain high and continue climbing overall. Like I said, because that's the notion that every Nigerian, the ordinary Nigerian, look at, the notion that they always believe that as long as inflation goes down, prices are supposed to go down. Well, it doesn't happen that way, because many prices remain high and continue to climb higher as well. And now most persons will be saying, why is that happening? Why is it that, in quotes, in Nigeria, iron floats in water? I'll leave you to answer that one. I'm not in the mood for that one. Let's look at another another index in this particular matter of why prices change in the Nigerian economy. Inflation is a key factor in this particular matter, because inflation can slow, but prices don't fall. You know, I've hammered on that one before, that a common confusion, like I said, is the thinking that inflation slowing means prices go down. Well, let's take an example statistically. In September 2025, just a couple of months ago, the inflation rate slowed to 18% in September, about 18%. But that means prices were still rising. If you remember back then, what you bought in the month of, let's say, April, rose in terms of price in the month of September. But just not that this time around, the prices, unlike in previous years, where you see rate of increase and not the actual price, you know, because actual price decline is not the business of inflation. Why Nigeria experienced price changes? Very structural. The first one is on currency depreciation. Now, it will take an economist to break this particular aspect down. But to you, especially to the ordinary Nigerians who want to understand this, I will just break it down a little. A weaker naira, or your weaker currency, makes imported goods more expensive. So when your currency, your local currency weakens, you know, when they value down, goods that you're going to be importing from abroad would definitely be, you know, expensive, like importing food, manufacturing inputs, fuel, machinery costs. These would definitely skyrocket inflation. Now, with food inflation consistently in the region of, or the range of the 20 to 40% in recent years, staple foods become much more expensive. I mean, there's no two way about that to discuss that one. You know, it's really, really high up there in terms of food inflation in Nigeria. The next one is on energy and transport cost. Yeah, energy and transport costs, where fuel and energy changes influence the cost of transport and production. And of course this one, you know, when these go up, talking about fuel and energy, when they go up, definitely consumers' prices will follow. There's also the issue of rising core prices. Now, like I said, some of these things is only the economists that can understand very well, but I'll just break it a little down here. There's the core inflation. You know, we have the general inflation. That's what it invariably means. But in this aspect, we are excluding food and energy. Now, the core inflation has been above about 20% at times, meaning that general prices beyond food are also rising. All right, so this is where we'll now ask the next question, because we've been talking about how prices change, how the economic decisions, how it has affected the everyday Nigerian, not only the households, but the businesses and maybe small-scale businesses and traders, as it were, and other strata of the society. The next question we want to be asking ourselves is, in all of this, who is the most affected in these economic decisions? Who is the most affected? So, for the economic decisions, they do not actually affect everyone equally. This you will understand when we talk about taxation. All right, because definitely we'll look at that in subsequent episodes. But let's just look at how some groups feel the impact immediately, because they are the ones that bear the brunt. And we also look at how their spending, their savings, and of course what they earn bring about how they are the ones that, you know, bear the brunt. We'll talk about those who really are most affected. Let's start from the low-income households. Now, these are the ones that are most affected, the low-income households. Here, we are talking about minimum wage earners, civil servants, daily wage workers, unemployed households, you know, and of course, these guys I've just talked about now, these segments, these sectors I just talked about now, spend about 60 to 80% of their income on food and transport, the essentials. Okay, they have little or no savings, which I talked earlier on. They have no edge against inflation. They cannot control inflation. And how does these economic decisions now, how do these economic decisions affect these households? Now, let's look at it. Fuel price hikes. The moment we have fuel increment in price, the low income loses out value fast. Your income becomes like as if it's not there. Because remember, these are people who have fixed income. So the moment inflation comes, the moment fuel price hikes come in, these guys, their monies is just like almost as worthless. Now, there's the issue of inflation.